We're back with episode 2, season 2, My Mayor, and joining us is candidate and current city council person, Brandi Gabbard. Great to see you.
Hi, Joe. Good to see you again.
So we're continuing getting to know the person behind the policy, and we've got 5 more questions to help us do that. The first one is, what's something you become much better at in the last 5 years that would surprise your younger self?
Well, I think after, the last 5 years really being my second term on city council, right? I think that one of the things that has surprised me even about myself is my ability to kind of take common sense and be able to apply that to really highly complex issues that I never could have imagined walking into City Hall that I would have needed to become an expert on, right? The one that really jumps out to me the most is our infrastructure. That is certainly an area as, growing up as a performing arts kid and then, finding my way into the real estate world. Never in a million years could you have told me that I would be an expert on infrastructure funding and infrastructure planning, right? But unfortunately, because the district that I have represented has been, really challenged with these flooding issues, really dating back to 2020, whenever Tropical Storm Eta came through, that really has, framed a lot of the work that I have done on city council. But the way that I have approached that has been through common sense. I'm a pretty logical person. I'm a very curious person. I like to learn. I like to listen, and I like to trust our experts. And I think that skill has served me very well. But if you would have told me that when I was growing up, or even maybe 10, 15 years ago, I never would have believed you. But certainly it's something that I'm very glad that I've been able to kind of get my hands around and understand at a better level.
Right. And I think of that as almost like first principles thinking, where you can break down problems to basic components, and then kind of the complexity comes into how they all interplay with each other. Do you kind of find that as well? Is it really it's individual items can be simple, but the real magic comes into how the individual items play off each other?
Well, and I think that things evolve over time too, right? I mean, when I ran for office in 2017, I was running on an affordable housing platform. And then what I've recognized over my time on city council is that being in a coastal city, our resiliency issues are compounding our affordability issues. And so you have to be nimble in this work because your city changes, what you are up against changes, and you really have to just be able to, again, take knowledge that you already have, apply that, but then be open to learning other things. And again, I think that curiosity and common sense, I think when you have those two things at play, you really can be a much more effective leader.
And do you feel like we were talking a little bit about AI before we started recording? Do you feel like the pace of change is accelerating?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, everything, is moving at a much faster pace today than it once did. And I think that again is why it is so important for, especially at local government, to be nimble, to have fast response, not, I'm a big fan, obviously, of planning and making sure that we're doing our due diligence and that we're getting it right. But we also can't be victims of planning taking so long that we've kind of missed the boat by the time, we get to the outcome. Our world is moving fast, and I think that we in local government need to find ways to move faster.
That's great. What's a question you wish more people would ask before forming an opinion?
Well, I think that it's important for people to understand how someone came to a decision before they form an opinion about maybe not the decision itself, but the motivations behind it. I think that, for better or worse. And of course, I'll speak, specifically to myself and how policy happens within my office in city council is that, we do a lot of research. We do a lot of due diligence. We meet with a lot of stakeholders in order to form opinions. But, sometimes when you are kind of down in the muck and the mire of doing the work, you maybe don't publicize quite as much how you came to that decision. And I understand. I mean, most people only see the sound bites or the, headlines of what that ultimate decision was. And I wish that there were better ways for people to understand how we do our due diligence. One of the things that I think of quite often is the push that I had back earlier this year for us to pass a resolution for city council to pause the development of the gas plant. That didn't come easy. That came with a lot of behind the scenes constituent and stakeholder feedback sessions, groups that I, met with that were really, asking me what could be done to kind of slow down and make sure that we were really the ones in the driver's seat. And so, you try to articulate that in the moment, but sometimes it's months and months of work that gets you to that decision. And so I wish that there was a better way that we could, kind of communicate that. Certainly I am always looking for ways to be more communicative and more transparent in the decisions that we make. And I think that, that is definitely something that I've learned over the years and something that I take very seriously and continue to try to work on every day.
Makes sense. And I'd probably challenge, the voter base also to look at themselves, because I think a lot of times, even if you do all of that, there's still people that are over optimized. They call sort of like one issue voters, where there's one thing that just means so much to them that it sort of blinds them to all the other perspectives that are out there. And so even if you do present all that evidence, they're so over optimized for one thing, that it doesn't always land as well as it should. Tell me about a time when you realized you'd been completely wrong about someone, or a little bit wrong.
Well, I think that, when you present that question, I think that, for a lot of people, maybe they automatically go to like the negative, right? Like, well, I thought this person or this thing would be this, and instead it turned into this, and that was a negative experience. I kind of flip that on its head a little bit. And I look at it from a time when, and I don't want to mention any names, I won't mention people, I won't mention organizations, but I will mention that there have been times when, maybe someone thought something about me, or I thought something about a position that they had on a particular issue. And that issue, and I've got one in my head right now, I can think of it very clearly, but again, I want to keep people nameless. So, I think that sometimes, especially in a big, small town, we kind of think we already know where people are with things. And, I have had the experience, especially early on, from taking the initiative to reach out to a group of stakeholders and say, listen, I know that you are maybe on a different side of this issue, but I want to meet and I want to hear where you are on this, how you came to that decision, and maybe we can find some common ground. And very happily, that organization took the opportunity to meet with me. And I will tell you that even though on that particular issue that was at hand, we didn't agree, we kind of agreed to disagree. We heard each other, we better understood each other, and in the years following that, have had a lot of opportunity to work together on other issues. And that really, I think, is so refreshing, because so many times we're just stuck in where we disagree. And for me, learning that skill of being unafraid to kind of reach out, say, come to the table. I want to hear, even though I know you disagree with me today, I think is that kind of community consensus building that we have got to get back to as a culture, as a society, because the good stuff actually happens when sometimes you meet with people that you didn't necessarily align with and or agree with on one particular issue.
Yeah, makes sense. And the common sort of take is that with social media specifically, the people's identity gets kind of fused with their opinions, and sometimes it's hard for them to move on their opinions because all of a sudden they see it as a threat to their identity, and so that's a hurdle to overcome. Yeah.
Well, and I think as, an elected official, someone in the public eye, I think that it's important. And, I've talked about this several times. Maybe I've even talked about it with you about, really making sure that you know who you are at the core of your being. And you are very strong in that, your integrity, that you're keeping that intact, because social media certainly can create a narrative of you that is not necessarily in line with the person that you are. And you have to be a big enough person to be able to overcome that and continue to move forward and do good things.
Yeah. There's actually a motivation structure for people to weaponize that too. So it's not even just straight misunderstanding. It can actually be done intentionally, which is unfortunate. Yeah.
Absolutely.
What's a lesson that life taught you the hard way?
Well, the hard way, I mean, we all certainly come up against very challenging times. I've lived 50 years of life and had, quite a bit of ups and downs, especially, growing up. And I think that the thing that I have learned is that hard work always pays off in the end. When I started on city council, I made a decision then to continue with my career as a real estate broker. And I did that intentionally, not only to be able to provide for my family, but also I thought that it was important that I continue to maintain that connection to our community through the business world, through the active work of being a realtor. And that has not been easy. Maintaining a full-time career, raising a kid, being a city council member, like all of that certainly has had its struggles and its challenges over the years. But here I am on the backside of that, almost 9 years of doing all of that. And what I have learned is that commitment and dedication to, really the hard work. It's that work ethic that I was raised with. Being raised by a single mom who a lot of times had to work a couple of jobs, being raised by grandparents who were factory workers who scraped for everything that they had. That hard work and diligence of really making sure that, you're always showing up and you're trying to give 150%. I think that it's that, kind of grit that I have developed that has, gotten me through a lot of those hard times. And it's something I try to instill in my child, is that hard work at the end of the day will see you through the most challenging things that will come your way.
Definitely. All right, last question. When nobody's asking anything of you and curiosity takes over, what's the rabbit hole you disappear into?
Well, you say rabbit hole. That's an easy one to go down in today's day and age as well on numerous different things, right? But the thing that, I kind of go to, like when I take off all of the business stuff and the political stuff and it's just me and I get to do the things that I love as a human, the things that fill my soul, and really is kind of like a mental health break. I go to the garden. I go to, nature and being able to, get our hands in the dirt, grow something beautiful. So those rabbit holes will take you a lot of places. I grew up in Indiana and, we had fruit trees and my grandfather grew a huge garden every year. And it was easy to do there in the summer because of the climate. Not so easy to do here in Florida. Like it's a whole other ball game. So learning how to grow food here in Florida specifically, learning, the concept of like a food forest and what that does for the environment, for wildlife, for us trying to feed ourselves here in an urban community. Those things I find really exciting. I love that sort of work. So you'll often find me like like, laying out a garden plan, or, like working on, creating seedlings with my husband. He's kind of taken it over during the campaign, which I have loved. Because then I get to come in and just like harvest the tomatoes and things like that. So that's been really great. And, we do it as a family. We love it. And so, I think that's that, born on Earth Day environmentalist kind of part of me, that certainly I can go down a very deep, deep, deep rabbit hole. You and I could probably do a whole show on it. So, yeah.
Nice. We can do that. What's your favorite thing growing around your house?
Well, right now we've had quite the crop of tomatoes, but it's stink bug season. So our tomatoes are hurting a bit. So we'll probably bring in some okra to get us through this kind of late part of the summer when it's so brutal outside. And then come this fall, we will start growing peppers, tomatoes again, lettuces. My food forest is doing great. I've got a couple of papayas, some banana, moringa, all kinds of great stuff. And, really just trying to build that ecosystem here on our property. It's going very well.
That's the first answer where actual rabbit holes are in play.
Yeah. Well, and we have bunnies. We have bunnies everywhere. And I love them. Just trying to keep them out of the garden can sometimes be a challenge. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for taking a little bit of time away from your very busy schedule to join us again. And we'll look forward to catching up in a couple of weeks on the next episode. Until then, enjoy the process of campaigning.
Thank you. I appreciate you.